So picture this. It's late 2025, and two of the world's biggest democracies, the United States and India, find themselves totally locked in a pretty serious diplomatic and economic crisis.
I mean, this was a partnership that had been carefully built for years, right? The whole point was to balance power in Asia and really crank up global trade. So you have to ask, how did it all go so wrong so fast?
Well, the answer is that all of these simmering tensions were just bubbling under the surface, and they were about to boil over in a super dramatic, very public way that led to this massive international standoff. And this was the flashpoint, a staggering 50% tariff imposed by the US on all Indian goods. That's one of the highest tariffs ever slapped on a major trading partner. Just wild. So in this explainer, we're going to break it all down for you. We'll look at what happened, why it was such a big deal on the world stage, and what it all means for the future of this really, really critical relationship.
To really get what happened in the crisis, we've got to rewind a little bit and look at the relationship between the US and India right before it all kicked off. And let's just say, it was complicated.
And you can see that complication right here. On one hand, you had these really deep shared interests, like working together in the Quad to counter China's influence. But on the other hand, you had these major points of friction. India was insistent on its strategic autonomy, which basically means we'll make our own choices, and that included keeping close ties with Russia. So a few key things happened in early 2025 that really set the stage for this whole blow-up. It actually started off pretty good, with a visit in February to set this huge trade goal. But then, this ceasefire between India and Pakistan in May became a real sore spot. And by June, what many saw as a diplomatic snub over a dinner invitation, well, that started to put a personal strain on the relationship between the leaders themselves. Okay, so let's get into how all that underlying tension just exploded. How it went from some diplomatic awkwardness to a full-blown trade war that had everyone watching. And the escalation was fast. I mean, really fast. It started when President Trump claimed he was the one who mediated the India-Pakistan ceasefire. India immediately and very publicly said, nope, you had nothing to do with it. That led to an initial 25% tariff, but then the US doubled down, citing friction over India's energy policy, and jacked the tariff up to that punishing 50%. And you know, experts immediately saw how serious this was. Analysts like Michael Kugelman didn't pull any punches, straight up calling it the worst breakdown in the relationship in more than 20 years. That tells you something.
As you can probably guess, a 50% tariff between two economies this big sent immediate shockwaves around the world, and the criticism was widespread and it was loud.
Journalist Fareed Zakaria pointed out just how nuts this was, and this chart really puts it into perspective. The US put India, the world's biggest democracy, in the same high tariff category as a nation like Syria. It just completely undid decades of work from both parties in the US to build a stronger relationship. And the criticism came thick and fast from all sides. You had people from totally different ends of the political spectrum. Nikki Haley, John Bolton, House Democrats, all saying this was basically a huge self-inflicted wound. The argument was that it completely undermined the bigger strategic goal of building an alliance to counter China. So, what did India do? Did they just give in? Absolutely not. The government's response was totally defiant. They reasserted their right to strategic autonomy, especially on energy, and made it crystal clear they would not be pressured. And that right there set the stage for a long, damaging standoff. So, with both sides dug in, how did they ever pull back from the brink? Well, this bitter fight eventually forced them to the table, and it led to a landmark agreement in early 2026 that would completely reset the whole relationship. After months of just intense tension, a deal started to take shape, and it involved some pretty major concessions from both sides. The US agreed to slash its tariff way down to 18%. In return, India committed to cutting its own tariffs and, this is the big one, to significantly shift its energy purchases away from Russia. And if you want to understand the sheer scale of this reset, just look at this number. To really seal the new deal, India signaled it planned to buy a massive $500 billion worth of American energy, aircraft, and technology. That's a huge commitment. But here's the thing. If you only see this as a trade deal, you are totally missing the bigger picture. This was about way more than just tariffs and goods. A lot of analysts argue that this whole crisis and the deal that ended it represented a massive pivot for India. A pivot towards this new strategy called geoeconomic alignment. Basically, it's the idea that you deliberately tie your economy to a friendly geopolitical bloc. You start prioritizing secure, trusted supply chains with your allies over just finding the cheapest possible price anywhere in the world. So this was India's big bet. The thinking was, let's accelerate our own growth and make our economy more resilient by becoming a super important part of the US-aligned economic world, even if that meant, giving up a little bit of independence on foreign policy.
And a strategic choice like that has these profound long-term ripple effects. We're talking deeper tech cooperation, a fundamental change in how India thinks about its energy security, a potential cooling of that historic friendship with Russia, and of course, a clear step away from that long-held ideal of pure strategic autonomy.
Which leaves us with this huge, fascinating question. Has India made a calculated trade? Did it essentially swap a piece of its treasured foreign policy independence for what it hopes will be a more secure and prosperous economic future? The answer to that question is probably going to define India's path and its relationships around the globe for the entire next decade.